Hello everyone and welcome to Zpeaktures Productions. I'm Richard and today I'll be reviewing the XIAudio and this is the Broadway. Now the Broadway is actually the full balance version and there is a Broadway S which is a single-ended version meant for IEMs. The Broadway itself is more of a transportable amp, as you can see. This is not very small nor very big and it does have batteries inside, which I'll talk about it later. But overall, you can see here the size, the shape is very similar to something such as the Toping amp. You can see here. Very similar, and this makes it an excellent choice if you're using it for a bedside unit or something like a desktop amplifier. Now, this amp is a full balance amp. You can see that there is two balance output in front. This is a 4.4. You can see here 4.4 and the XLR, and then the back only has XLR input and no RCA. It runs on full balance topology, and you know there is by right no crossfeed or anything inside the amplifier itself, and therefore supposedly two very clean tracks within the amp. Now the amp itself, physically, you can see it's like this, not very big, very easy to hold, very solid build, and you can literally see the amount of metal used. This is like 2mm of aluminium, makes it a very good feeling amplifier. Now I want to say that this amplifier was purchased second hand. I didn't purchase first hand because I saw a really good deal, and I can just honestly tell you that the price was almost a quarter of the sales price, which made me really tempted, so I wanted to try it out and bring you this particular review here. Now, first let's talk about the physical aspect of the amp before I talk a little bit on like operations and power. The physical aspect of the amp, as I said, full balance amp, two balance out, two balance in, and then a volume knob, some lights at the corner here, you can't see because it's not on now, and then at the back there's a switch and a power in. This power is a 24 volt 1 amp power supply. They provide you this power supply here. This is a Minwell, which is a pretty good switching power supply, and it's meant to charge the batteries and also power the amp if you are using it connected to the mains. I'll talk about the operations later a little bit, but you can just honestly see that this is a very simple amplifier. Yes, there's one more thing. This is the gain switch. Now, you can see now there are some funny things happening in the design. I'll talk about the bad things first, then I'll talk about the good things, right? The first bad thing is that the edges, you can see it's damn clean and nice, but it also means that this edge here, especially the corner, is pretty sharp. I mean, you can touch it without hurting yourself, but if you were to use or accidentally knock into it and use some force, it may scratch you. That is one thing. That's the first thing. The second thing is the switch. Now, I show you something, the switch. Press down again. You can press down again. You can press up again. Now this is a really weird design. This power switch firstly is in the wrong position. At the back of a portable amp isn't the best position, especially for a portable amp. If this was a desktop, you can on it and don't care about it. I mean, for a portable amp, where you're going to off it because you have to maintain the batteries, back is really not good. And not only that, the switch reverts to a center position, pushing up on it, pushing down off it, and this requires memory. If you have used most switches, it's a toggle on and off, be it a button toggle or a rocking toggle. It's a toggle, it's on and off. But this one requires you to remember the state and remember that pulling up on it, pushing down off it. If you pull up and pull up and pull up again, it will just remain on, and you push down again, it remain off. Not the best implementation. It uses a lot of force, really too much force for a simple switch this small. That's the first thing. Or should I say second thing? I mean, the first thing was the case, right? And then the last thing I want to comment is why put a gain switch at the bottom of the amp? And next, the gain switch is recessed. So you actually need to push your finger in and try to tweak it around. I mean, you're trying to reduce accidental change, but I mean, most amps have gain switch right in front or in the software menu. I don't see why you need to do this. And lastly, 4 switches. I mean, I'm not sure whether you can see these 4 really tiny switches. It only has high gain and low gain, nowhere in the center. So, well, I don't think you need to do such a complicated gain mechanism. You just have 1 toggle switch or 2 toggle switch and call it a day. Why 4 switches? So these are the 3 things that is really weird with this amp. But let's talk about the good design stuff. Firstly, I think the design is very simple. It makes it really, really clear how to use it. Balance in, balance out. Next, it has a 4.4 and a XLR. This is pure convenience. I mean, XIAudio could have just give you an XLR and ask you to use an adapter, which is quite common these days. But they chose to give you both XLR and 4.4, and both of them works really well with this amplifier. I would say, yes, you have finally thought about your users in a good way, unlike the last three. And then lastly, this is the nicest volume knob, and this is pretty much the reason why I like to use this as a bedside unit, because I can close my eyes, touch, and then turn the knob, and it turns really, really well. Now the knob does, I would say, start and end in a weird position. It starts at 11 o'clock, just like its brand, and ends at like 9 o'clock. So it does turn quite a bit, and it's very smooth. I did notice that if you were to turn sometime, I heard before a scratching noise, you know, like very cheap volume knobs. The volume knob is supposed to be a good one. I believe it's the Blue Alps, but well, it did happen once before, so maybe it's a one-off, maybe it's just, you know, old. Because as I said, this is a second-hand, and this amp has already been in the market for a few years. Now, that's about it for the physical aspect. Let's talk about the operations. Operations-wise, full balance in, full balance out, and normally I use some sort of a balance cable in, and I use something like a DAP, or my laptop with a balance dongle, or something like a Hugo TT with XLR outs into this amp. Quite simple. And then the output, obviously, 4.4 or XLR. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the power. As I said, the Minwell power supplies are pretty good, but this amp, if you do plug in the power supply, there is a very strong ground loop sound if you do not plug any device into the amp. Which means if you're not connected to a DAC, you're not connected to a dongle that is in pause mode that creates this blackness, you know, you can actually hear the hum. But the moment the sound plays, or you hear the black from your DAC, or your DAC wakes up and powers, it will remove the sound away. And if you go and read ASR, supposedly the hum is a pure, non-connected mode problem. When it runs, there is no issue, and you should get very clean sound. And my experience tells me that too. I tried plugging in, not plugging in, and the moment there is some playing in the DAC or the DAP, well, the hum totally goes away, and you hear pure blackness before the sound kicks in. So I don't think there's an issue. Just note that plugging in a power supply, you may at first thought is a problem, but it is not. However, that being said, you can upgrade the power supply. I did notice that if I was using the Ferrum OOR's switching power supply, not the Hypsos by the way, it does reduce the hum significantly. Now, once again, it doesn't affect you while playing the music, but if you are affected by it in any way, like you don't want to even hear it when the amp is on, get a better power supply. Does reduce that issue. But if not, it doesn't really affect you. Anyway, the purpose of this power supply is to charge the battery inside, and when you are playing music, the battery is the one, supposedly based on their technical documentation, is the one that is powering the amp and therefore providing the sound. So just note, I mean, how do they actually implement it? Not too sure, but at least I'm pretty sure that while playing, there is no distortion or hum due to the power supply. Now, this amp has 4 batteries inside, as I said earlier. It has batteries, and you can see in this photo here, the batteries are user replaceable, 18650. You can easily change out. Just remember that based on the specification on the website, you have to use those that without the cap, without the protection mechanism, just the pure 18650s, and you can replace it. Mine is with Sony with the high discharge, 30 discharge. Supposedly sound better, but this is done by the previous owner, so I'm not sure what the original sound actually is. And that's already about it for the operation. So let's talk a little bit on the dimension of this amp first. I mean, I think I showed you around, right? And I told you that this is the same size as the A70, right? But don't forget, there's a power supply here. And the A70 just used a standard cable, you know, a standard 3-pin cable, right? But if you were to compare to something like the Ferrum OOR, let me take the Ferrum OOR here, and I put it on top. This is really, really small. You can see that this amp is significantly smaller than the Ferrum OOR. So it actually is a very good amp for the purpose of desktop or bedside because it takes very little footprint and, well, it has battery. So if you cannot plug in a power or near a power, it can easily slot in nicely in an area for you to listen music. However, this is not a portable amp. I really don't call it portable. I mean, nobody's going to carry this and listen music. I mean, plug in the headphones. Possible, maybe in the 90s, not in the 20s, right? 2020s. Don't do that. Oh, never mind. Let me leave the Ferrum here and talk about it later. So let's talk about sound quality of this amp. Now, this amp, sound quality wise, I'll say it's a competent class A. First, we talk a little bit on the power of the amp, right? The power of the amp. This amp does power the Susvara. It does power the Abyss 1266. It does power the Moondrop. Which, if you go online and see, the specs of this requires a lot of power. This has lower sensitivity than the Susvara and only has 8 ohms of resistance. So it is a high load to amplify. It does power this perfectly. However, my recent change, the true test case of how powerful an amp is, and if it works well, is this. This is the RAW requisite CA1A. This thing requires tons of power. It distorts my Enleum. By the way, I show you my Enleum here. My Enleum amp here that does 1 watt of output distorts while powering the CA1A. We are not even talking about whether does it sound good, whether does it have enough power, enough dynamics to sound good. This is a case where you actually just need the power to even run the headphones. Enleum distorts at high volumes. I would say as based on my measurement then with my handphone next to the headphones, it's about 82 dB average kind of sound. The XIAudio here does not distort, and it can even go higher than Enleum and it still doesn't distort. Based on specification, this amp gives out 1.5 watt of power at 32 ohms. And I believe that if you go at 16 ohms, it probably can output more because based on ASR's measurement at 25 ohms, it does output 1.8 watts before significant distortion sits in. So I'm sure that this guy can probably output like 2 watts of power into 16 ohms. And if you are using something like the RAW requisite with the TI1B adapter interface here, this thing should comfortably power the headphones without any distortion, any issues. 2 watts of power, 2 watts of clean power. And I can tell you that honestly, I enjoyed this combination. This is like my ultimate bedside unit now. Okay, so power wise, no worries. 2 watt of clean power. I'm pretty sure it can do it. So then next, let's talk a little bit on the sound quality. And I left the Ferrum OOR here because sound quality for a good amp is really, really hard. I mean, most modern amps are actually good. If the amp doesn't sound right, well, it doesn't sound right up front. It sounds weird, right? But the XIAudio Broadway, upon first listen, it sounds just like any other good amp. It sounds like the A70. It sounds like the Ferrum OOR. And I bet with you that if I was to do a blind test on you, if I was to play the entire song, take a 30-second break, change amp, play another song, you probably can't remember which is better. The only way to know an amp is better or not is to compare it within seconds, like swap the cables really quick and try it on. Preferably not to look at the amp itself, but I have no choice doing one person. But what I do is I listen and I try to verify. If I say I think that this part has an improvement, I straight away try to swap cables and verify whether that is true. That is the best I can do given what I have. I hope that one day I have a measuring AP555 to measure, but that is probably in the not so near future. So let's go back to sound quality. I'll say that the amp itself sounds very competent, even with the RAW requisite CA1A, with the Moondrop, with the Susvara, with the 1266, with my Dynafi. It sounds good. Even with DC itself, it sounds good. In fact, that's one of my bedside headphones also. My bedside headphone today is that and the CA1A because that is a close back. My wife doesn't scold me. And on this XIAudio Broadway, it sounds perfect. It sounds just like any of these Ferrum or A70 if I was not A being immediately, no, I couldn't blind, but I could A be as fast as possible within like 10 seconds. Now, if I was to compare them, side by side, then I'll say as there is some slight difference. Now, 11 Audio is very competent. Good bass, good soundstage, good clarity, good treble extension. There is almost no flaw in the sound, at least I can hear. But if you were to compare to, let's say, the Ferrum OOR, then I would say as the Ferrum OOR has I just think there's a small touch of additional clarity, and that can be observed in the song called Unravel by Ado. Oh, before I start, let me show you the 3 songs I used to compare. Ado's Unravel, Ultima, and I also use The Brave. And let me show you the 4th song also. Sometimes I do use that too. I do compare, but I don't take notes. And the last one will be Suzume. So based on all my A being, when I think that there is some slight difference, I'll say the Ferrum OOR has slightly better clarity. I noticed that in Unravel and Ultima, when multiple instruments come in, there is just this very, very slight clarity difference. Sometimes I don't know whether it's my hallucination, but yeah, slight clarity difference. And also when I compare, like switch cable and try, I'll say as the 11 Audio has a slight warmness, slight smoothness to the general sound, yet no loss in details. I noticed there's no much difference in details. I heard many parts of Ultima, small little string instruments, little bells, the pianos in Unravel. There's more little things that's happening behind the Brave. No issues. Details are not a problem, even though there is a slightly smoother vocal. I would say the vocal on the 11 Audio is slightly more enjoyable. It's not like the GSX type smooth, but slightly smoother than the Ferrum, slightly smoother than the Enleum. Makes it a little bit more enjoyable and a little bit warm. Once again, clarity, a touch lower, and not only that, the bass quantity, I'm pretty sure on that, the bass quantity of the 11 Audio just feels a touch lesser. I'm talking about the mid-bass type of impact, not the sub-bass. Sub-bass, very similar, but the mid-bass type of impact, just a slight touch lower. I just feel that if I listen to very bass-heavy music, the Brave, there's one part where there's a lot of beats, I just feel that there is just this slight touch lesser on the 11 Audio. And that is trying multiple times, playing at different volume, very loud, very soft. It just gives me this common feeling compared to the Ferrum OOR. Now, compared with the A70 Pro, I'll say as, the 11 Audio is just a more enjoyable amp. Once again, just like my other review, the A70 Pro is extremely competent, extremely clean. Gives me this like super dynamic range, like blackness, high volume blackness. A70 Pro can do it very well. But it's just too perfect. I mean that's probably the reason why it measures so well. It's just so perfect. I mean, if you have never heard other amps and compare them side by side, you probably can't tell a difference. As I say, most of the time, you really can't tell. But if you do compare, you will notice there's this ultra cleanliness in A70 Pro that may not be enjoyable. Especially if your headphones are already very more of the cleaner side, the more brighter side. This will enhance it in a not so good way. Well, the 11 Audio is smooth, slightly smoother, as detailed, sounds great. I don't really find much difference between the A70 Pro and the 11 Audio, except for the slight warmness and smoothness. If not, soundstage feels exactly the same, details feels exactly the same, and overall placements feels exactly the same, just mainly in the vocal smoothness, and slight warmness. That's really about it. I mean, it means that the 11 Audio, as an amplifier for desktop, is competent. It does compete quite closely with the Ferrum OOR, just a slight difference. And then it's very competent compared to the A70 Pro. And if you do not want such a clinical sound, 11 Audio can provide you that. Now, of course, this has battery, so I compare with what I feel is a king of battery amplifiers. This is the Enleum. Now, straight up, the Enleum has less power. Less power when it comes to running the raw requisite. It has more than enough power to run the Susvara to really, really loud sound. And it has more than enough power to run the Moondrop to really, really loud sound. But when it comes to running the raw requisite, it does run out of gas and starts distorting. This is where the 11 Audio is slightly better. It means that 11 Audio does provide more power than the Enleum. However, removing power aside, right, the actual power side, The Enleum always sounds more powerful. Compared to any other amp, it always sounds more powerful, and this still applies to the Broadway. It sounds more powerful than the Broadway, it sounds more separated than the Broadway, and it sounds bigger than the Broadway. So the Enleum is still better. I mean, consider that if you have watched my other reviews, and I already kind of say that the Enleum compared to the A70 compared to the Ferrum sounds like that, and now I'm telling you that the XIAudio Broadway sounds the same for almost anything except for small differences. It's kind of expected that compared to the Enleum is still my preferred choice. If I want that power, I want that punch, I want that sub bass, I want that separation, it's still there. I think the XIAudio, like compared to the other amps, the only thing that is slightly better than Enleum, maybe, is the slight details difference. But that being said, because the XIAudio is actually slightly warmer than the Ferrum, it is closer to the Enleum. But the Enleum is still a more warm amp versus the rest. Now that is really about it. The XIAudio, at least in sound department wise, is on par with most of the good desktop amplifiers. I have not tried the extreme. I mean, not the DCS, not the ZEC, I think HM1, not those, but at least compared to in the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 range, I think the XIAudio is very competent. And even to the A70 Pro, which is a crazy good deal considering its power, it is very competent and does provide you an alternative in terms of sound, a slightly more enjoyable sound. Now let's talk about price. Now this amp is not cheap, especially if you buy in Singapore, 3,800 Sing dollars. If you buy in the States, this is I think 2.6K today if you buy from the website directly. XIAudio, by the way, is a Taiwanese brand, but they sell in USD at about 2,599. They recently rose the price. Original was 2,299. So it made it more expensive, and because of that, I'll say it's $300 increase. It now is very close to the Ferrum OOR with the hip soles, very close to the Enleum, and makes it a little bit hard sell because considering that it's a full balance topology, it's not very tiny. The power is good, but you know, the Ferrum OOR can even go way higher. It does make this XIAudio a little bit tricky if you are considering it firsthand. Unless you really need the battery function, I cannot find a good reason why you should buy this over the Ferrum OOR. Even the Ferrum OOR with the switching power supply is pretty good deal. And for the same price, for almost the same price, I mean slightly difference, you can buy the Enleum. And you can also consider something that even the Holo Bliss, which is just, I think, yeah, it's just like 300 USD more, right? And let's not even forget the A70 Pro here. This guy is like, I don't know, man, 1/4 the price, 1/4. So this puts it a very challenging price amp. At least it sounds better than the JSX Me. But you know, you're going to pay such a premium price. So I think XIAudio, by raising the price, makes this really hard to compete with the modern amps. But if you can buy secondhand, I think it's a really good deal. As long as you can get it at like 60% of the price, which means below 2,000, I think this is a good deal because it is very comparable to similar amps. But at 2006, you're comparing like Burson GX, GT3X, you're comparing the Ferrum OOR without the hip soles. Add a bit more, you can buy the hip soles. Add a bit more, you can buy the Enleum. Add a bit more, you can buy the Holo Bliss. And you can choose to save all the money and buy the A70. So competitive, very competitive. Do I recommend this XIAudio? If you need a small amp that is not so clean like this amp, and you want to have the option to make it transportable and the option to use battery, yes, consider this. But if you don't need those things, you don't need to be this size, you don't need it to be transportable, you don't need the battery, you don't need to get this. And that being said, even you need all those, there are options such as the Canon C9, which I haven't tried. To be fair, I haven't compared this. But so far, you know, based on the price, based on the description, the Canon may be a better deal. It does provide more power, uses the same amount of batteries, smaller, and has a tube option. So I'm not too sure. Maybe once I try the C9, during the C9, I will revisit this again. But you know, the C9 compared to this may be a better deal if you are looking for transportable, battery-powered, high-output amplifier. Unless you really like the Class A. I mean, the slight warmness and smoothness without loss of details. Unless you really like that, maybe this is for you. But if not, maybe the Cayenne. But if you need the batteries, yeah, continue on considering this. But if you don't need the batteries, there are better amps. That's about it for today. I hope you enjoyed this short little review, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.